Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Today, I'm joined by Shaun Frederickson, who's the CEO of Freedom Revival and a podcast host. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, it's a pleasure to be here.
Just to start off, could you introduce yourself and how you got involved in politics and advocacy work?
Yeah, it all began when I had someone introduce me to the County Board of Supervisors. I'd never heard what it was. I've heard of city council meetings. I've heard of like school boards, but I didn't know the county met up. I was pretty ignorant to politics when all this began. So I had a friend invite me to a county board of supervisors. I had been paying attention to all the data that's been going on throughout 2020. And I heard the Health and Human Services say something that was not the truth. She was really spouting a lot of propaganda. And so I felt compelled to speak the truth. And so, in me doing so, that video ended up kind of traveling around the world. And a lot of people saw it. And that's kind of how it all started for me.
And in terms of being in California, you're in one of the states that was the most locked down during COVID. There was a real effort to keep everyone where they were. Were a lot of people aware of how restricted it was, of how much there was sort of junk science being thrown out there? Or was it something where you were introducing facts to a lot of people who didn't know them?
Man, that's a great question. It seems there's a pretty significant divide between individuals who kind of know that the mainstream media isn't something that we can take for fact. And so you have those that believe that, and you have those that kind of distrust the corporate news. And I would say that, it seems to be like 60-40, 50-50, or maybe 40-40, and there's like 10-20% in the middle that don't care.
Yeah, and that's something we've seen throughout the country as well. There does seem to be that divide. Now that we're in an area of time where COVID is still around, but politicians want to have it on the back burner as well. California has been slow to reverse those restrictions. Is there more
Totally.
frustration building up in California over the fact that California is behind a lot of states in reversing restrictions and mandates?
Man, I sure wish there was. There is a frustration amongst people that know there is still a local emergency order, but I would say the general public is so distracted with activities because it's so beautiful here in San Diego that you can just go back to the gym, you can go back to playing at the beach, go back to your daily activities. Everything seems the same unless you walk into a doctor's office or a medical establishment of any sort. The dentist, the chiropractor, they all kind of do the paper thing on their face. But beyond that, it feels so normal. I think the average person doesn't even realize that we're still in a local emergency.
And is that something that you think conservatives and activists have to be pushing more this to bridge this knowledge gap we have right now that's going on about what's even still on the books that's impacting people's lives?
Absolutely. As well as the significance of it, where we're informing them that, hey, this is still happening. And you realize that if it doesn't go away, they can continue to to use our resources, continue to get CARES Act money, and build kind of this little empire of their own, where you have the executive branch creating these mandates, which they're treating by law, when in reality, the executive branch has no authority to create law.
And I see that there you've brought in a lot of families to Freedom Revival. There seems to be a big focus on getting more educational freedom and freedom for parents to make decisions. Have these mandates and restrictions changed the layout of how many parents are involved in political processes in California? Because we've seen that throughout the country.
Absolutely. I think California is unique because of like the school. Are you familiar with there were assembly bills and Senate bills that were passing a few years ago that happened in California that really birthed a lot of homeschool moms and families to resist these policies. And those people are so activated, or have been so activated, that I believe that they've been shouting from the mountaintops, we have a problem in California. And now those families are really leading the charge as to what's going on during all these lockdowns in the past few years.
Yeah, and there's been an effort to sort of get on with that, especially for politicians throughout the country to utilize that to their own benefit. Do you see a
Yeah,
political component coming from those activists, people who are taking their kids out or homeschooling? Do you see them getting more politically involved past the local and state level?
I mean, it's happening for sure. I know of a couple individuals who are running for Congress who've been pretty outspoken, and so that's a federal position. And I hope that more people will choose to do so. I think we're educating ourselves to realize that we have much more authority than we realized,
Mhm.
and the more people that step into that authority, the more life and the more freedom and liberty that we'll preserve because of it.
And I've seen on Instagram you have something called Candidate Connect. You've been trying to work with candidates. How does that work?
Yeah, so what we're doing is trying to educate the average citizen to know First of all, this is an election year. The primary is going to be enormous. You know, every single assembly member in the state of California is going to be up for reelection. They're 50% of the state senators are up for reelection. Every congressional candidate from the House nationwide is up for reelection. I would say the average person doesn't know that. But if you're tired of Nancy Pelosi, if you're tired of Adam Schiff, if you're tired of Juan Vargas, if you're these corrupt politicians who are bought and paid for by pharma, by big tech, we have the ability now to remove them and replace them with quality candidates. And so Candidate Connect is really that opportunity to not just educate people as to what we're in the moment, but also point to those quality candidates that we can elect and put in office.
And a lot of people don't realize that many of the politicians that have been instrumental in mandates for the nation come from California. It really is a hotbed of people who are in charge of this country. Start even with Adam Schiff, the amount of power he holds, and Nancy Pelosi. Why do you think, aside from the population, that California is so instrumental in American politics? Is it because there's so much culture and arts there? Or is it just that people from there tend to be pushed a little bit more by Democrats?
Man, that's such a great question. I think there's so much nuance into it. I believe that a lot of it has to play into Hollywood, where the media is so strong, where everybody can think of a movie that they've watched that makes them love California. And I think there's this subconscious, just a desire to be here. I think 2021 is the first year where they haven't had an incline in population, but a decline for the first time in like 50 years. California is naturally just a place that people, it's kind of like I would say like a Paris or, you know, a New York City, where people are just gravitating toward it. And then you add the media component and it just captivates people's minds.
And that's an important point, because I think there has been this bit of a smear campaign against California as if everyone is leaving it. And it is still a very powerful place. And I know you have Freedom Revival there. And that's interesting because a lot of times conservatives or just people who are independent want to move away from California because they don't think there's a point in being there to do events. What is Freedom Revival and why is it based in California?
Well, some of the greatest movements that happened in the nation were birthed in California, like the Jesus People movement, the Billy Graham Crusades. And we realized that there's something awkward about California, that the media, like Hollywood and the corporate media, has done a great job to make people believe that California is extremely progressive, that we're socialists and we're Marxists, but that's not the truth. San Diego County, especially, like there are more conservatives here than there are progressives and socialists, but those who own the media are capable of manipulating the perspective. And so we're calling out those Christians. Like Calvary Chapel was birthed here. There are like 160, 180 Calvary Chapels that are in California alone. That's just one church, one denomination of a church. There are mega churches, almost like in every sub-city, there's a mega church where we're talking 10,000 people, 15,000 people attend these churches. But the problem in California is the Christians have not been activated. So we're really calling on the Christians to realize, if you want to preserve liberty, if you want California to change, it's on our shoulders to do so. And if we continue to be passive, not vote, not getting engaged, then we're going to get the same results that we've continued to get the past 20 to 50 years.
And that's an interesting point, because there is a massive Christian base within California, but it's often not utilized. Were the mandates and the restrictions, was that sort of the match that lit all of this up? Was it that parents got enraged, or just everyday people who weren't parents? What was the component that activated Christians?
Oh my God, what is the component that activated Christians? That's such a great question. Um, I think what it was is recognizing with the closures of our businesses and with the forced inoculation of our children, or the pressure for this forced inoculation, we realized that we've got to figure out who we are. And personally, for myself, I started reading history. I've gone back into the 1700s. I'm reading books in the 1600s. I want to understand, where do these ideas come from that created the freest nation on the globe, and understanding that it's a Christian Judeo-Christian movement that birthed it, for me, compelled me to even be more courageous in my beliefs. Like I've been a Christian for, I would say, gosh, since I was 19, so almost 15 years. But there hasn't really been this outspoken belief of who I am as a Christian, because it's been this like passive thing where we don't want to proselytize, we don't want to make people uncomfortable. But now we've become realizing that if we continue to be middle of the ground, not going to stand up for my beliefs, then that's going to create despots and tyrants, and we're going to lose everything if we don't. So I think the church is recognizing that we are the righteous resistance. We are the moral, and we are needed. We are like sought after within the culture and within politics.
And that's important because we know that Christians are needed when we have the big presidential elections. We know they have to go out to vote, but we don't always realize that they're needed within culture and they're needed to make that impact. Going forward, do you see a space for there to be even more Christian activism throughout the country? Do you see it evolving more and more as we get closer to the next election cycle, or even as we move away from the COVID mandates?
Oh, I certainly hope so. I hope the church realizes that, 30% of the church is voting. 30%. And that's terrible. I mean, that's odd too, because we have so many Christians that are complaining about the corruption in politics, but really it's the culture that creates politics. And so the church has become irrelevant. And if the church can recognize that we're irrelevant and then begin to like find a way to fit back into culture and politics nationwide, then I truly believe that we can have a revival of righteousness and morality and truth in the United States. But it's only going to happen if a nationwide move takes place, because it's happening here in San Diego. We've got so many churches that are recognizing, all right, it's time. Like, screw the 501c3 status. We've got to start talking politics. Let's go and let's stop being so timid and fearful. Let's get out of the box that maybe they've created for themselves to I don't know, produce a little bit of this activist spirit of America was built on citizens coming together. It's not, America isn't built on the military. Like a lot of people go thank military
Right.
members and they're just like, thank you so much for preserving our liberty. Well, they do so much to preserve our liberty, but it's really citizens. It's the citizens that created and produced the liberty that we live with.
Yeah, definitely. And that's an interesting point because everything really is citizen led. If citizens join the military, that is really where it's all based in. And I saw on your Instagram and some of the content from Freedom Revival that you're trying to interact more with people on the street. You go up to them, you ask them questions. Have you been surprised by like the knowledge gap about American history that you've seen? Have you been surprised how much there still is to teach people?
Mm, I'm not really surprised because of how ignorant I was. I look at, and I think that's why I'm so gracious with people that don't know a whole lot, is because 2 years ago, I'm in that same boat. The only reason that I know a little bit more than I knew then is because I started digging into the books and I started taking that responsibility back rather than someone leading me. I was leading myself. And I think I'm hopeful because most of the people I speak with are curious. Most of the people I speak with are genuinely engaged in this idea of like, okay, so I don't know what you're talking about. Could you explain it to me?
Right.
And I think that's a lovely experience where they're not just like cutting you off because they don't understand, but they want to engage, they want to understand. And so it creates this dialogue and they walk away empowered and I walk away empowered. I wish that they knew more, honestly. I wish that the average person would stump me. It's hard to be like, all right, so tell me who your congressional representative is. And they're like, oh, it's Juan Vargas or, Mike Levin. It'd be fantastic, but that's not reality.
And in terms of Freedom Revival, are there a lot of young people involved in it? If like, how can young people get involved to help it or just learn about what's going on from it?
That's a great question. So I would say most of Freedom Revival is pretty young. And by young, I mean under 35, under
Wow.
40 is most of the movement, which is really exciting because conservatives, if you go to like a Republican convention, most of them are 65 and older. I went to one up in Orange County last month or 2 months ago, just to observe it and see this Republican experience. And I was so surprised to see two, three, four people in my age demographic. But the Freedom Revival is the inverse, where we have most people are under the age of 35 and really excited and getting to this point where, I think why is because I think they're excited because they realize we're needed and there's a place for us. And we realize that it's on our shoulders. And most young people just want to have some kind of impact or want to produce some kind of change. And we realize that, hey, we've got to get in the polls. We've got to get young people excited to go work the polls and watch the polls. We want to get them excited about that whole day, 10-day period and count the ballots. This is a process that if we want it bad enough, we can preserve liberty. But if we don't, it's going to fall to the wayside.
And that's interesting because the left understands that young people need a purpose. They need something to get
Yeah.
up and do every day. They need to feel
Hmm.
like they're warriors for something. And for them, that's more social justice or some sort of economic policy. But the right has been sort of remiss in pushing that idea. What is your advice to older conservatives for how they can try to push young people into some sort of activism or to at least being curious, like you said, about things?
Well, it's so boring. Politics have been so boring through the conservatives. I'm watching some political ads through a lot of the progressives, and they're captivating. Their
Mhm.
stories. They're drawing in the community. They're focusing on what are your needs? What are your needs? We've all got something a part of the table. And the conservatives, they're always like, oh, the left to make fun of them, or oh, the right. And it's so divisive. And I think the youth, we're not really chasing this divisive narrative. We're trying to find the problem and then change it. And unfortunately, most of these older conservatives are just so disconnected from quality stories. They don't understand that we as human beings want to be a part of something magnificent. And the left, the progressives, the socialists, they get it. They realize
Right.
a good story is going to draw the emotions, it's going to draw people in. And most of the right and the conservatives, they just think like they go out and ask for money and let me be the savior. Then I'll be the one to go to Washington and save the day. But we don't really want to hear that. We don't
No.
want someone to save the day. We want to be a part of the saving. We want to be a part of the transformation because we're not just here to make money and then go to the grave. We're here to leave an impact.
And I don't think I've heard that before. The idea that the left is really good at telling a story and selling them on them being part of almost their own fairy tale or their own folk tale. And just sort of in closing, for people, young people, to people who want to know what to expect at a Freedom Revival event, are there speakers? Is there networking? What does that look like if you go and attend one?
Yeah. So what we try to do is encapsulate a whole experience. So you're going to get to hear music and speakers, which is going to be awesome. But more than that, we're bringing food trucks, and we brought together this community, like commercial area where there's vendors. It kind of
Mhm.
feels like one of those open fair trade kind of experiences where you can buy like jewelry and perfumes and all that stuff. And then on top of that, there's this Candidate Connect section where each county has the ability to connect with activists from your county. So we represent all of Southern California. So we had Orange County, San Diego County, Riverside, San Bernardino, Ventura, all present. And we had booths for each county with the activists that are boots on the ground in that county because we drew a big crowd, but there's no value in just showing up, doing the rah, 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 here we
Right.
go, if you're not walking away with a tangible tool to actually produce change. And I believe that's what we're attempting to do is give people tools like this is what you can do. If I think our goal with Freedom Revival was to get them to ask the question, what can we do? And then we would provide solutions to say, well, do you want to go speak at a school board? Do you want to go speak at this board of supervisors? Do you want to
Mhm.
run for office? Do you want to go help out with a petition? There is so much work to be done, and we'd be grateful to have you join the movement.
And I think that's necessary knowledge because a lot of times the rah rah can feel good. You can feel like you're hearing everything you want to hear, but you're just going to end up going back to another one of those rah rah things if there isn't an action component. Thank you so much for coming
Exactly.
on. Where can people follow you on social media, follow Freedom Revival to check it out?
Yeah, so Freedom Revival is on all the platforms under Freedom Revival Events. So TikTok, Instagram. We're on YouTube as well, posting some content there. If you'd like to follow me, I create a series called We the People on Instagram, and you can follow me at Shaun Frederickson.
Perfect. And we'll link all that below. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, such a joy. Thanks for having me.